In this installment of the API Testing 101 series with Test Modeler, we're going to be chaining together API calls and passing parameters. So firstly, let's review the APIs. Okay, so in this video tutorial, we're going to focus on the pet API, and we're going to focus on two specific endpoints here. Firstly, we have an endpoint where we can create pets, and we have an endpoint where we can get pets. Now, if we look at the create pet endpoint, what we can do is we can go over to this pet endpoint and perform a post. Here we've just put in a static JSON payload. But if we do this post, what you will see is we come back with a body here which has an ID, a name, and a status. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to retrieve this ID that has been created, and we want to feed it into another endpoint where we can reuse it and we can start chaining these calls together. Now, in order to achieve that, we have marked the function to return a string, and we have extracted a value using a JSON path to go into the JSON payload that's returned and get the ID back. Now, this uses JSON paths, and there's extensive documentation if you click the link in Test Modeler on how you can construct these for retrieving lots of different types. So it's quite an expressive language. If you prefer, you can use regular expressions, but we find JSON paths to be much easier. Now we've also added another function in here, and this function is going to go off and it's going to go and get a pet. Okay, and what we have done is we've parameterized the URL here. So we've got a parameter, and we're going to feed in here a string of pet ID, and that's what we've got in our square brackets here. So we can come in, we can run this, we could give a pet ID of 1, and what we should see is that that comes back okay with a pet here, and this is all the corresponding information for that pet. It's got a name of doggy. It's got various photos and different statuses attached to it. Let's now create a model. Now we've got these functions, we're going to come off and create a new model. And this is going to be creating a pet and then retrieving it. That's our goal of this model. So to do that, we'll open the model editor up. Then what we'll do is we'll add a start block. We'll navigate on the right hand side to these functions, which we've just taken a look at. And we're going to chain them together. So the first thing we're going to do is create a pet. Now if we look at this action, we have a return here which is getting assigned to this create pet variable. Now if we come back here, what we're then going to do is we're going to go and get a pet. So if we do an import, what we can do is we can come in and we can select variable, and then what we can do is we can come into here and we can select that create pet variable. So we're going to use that as the pet ID. So we're going to go off and create a pet, which is going to return our ID, and we're then going to feed this value in here to our get pet. What we'll then do is we'll just add a simple endpoint. So a very basic model, we can use all the techniques that we previously went into, where we can parameterize different JSON payloads, etc. But here we just want to focus on that parameter passing mechanism. Now we're ready to generate our tests. We'll hit the generate button, generate those scenarios, and we'll then come out and we'll do an execution. Now just to illustrate what's going on behind the scenes here for those of you who are technically minded, what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll just download and take a look at this source code file here. And what you'll see is we're going off and we're creating a pet, which is returning a string, and we're then feeding this into our get pet function. We've got the parameters being passed around here. If we come back into the modeler, hit close, we've got our results. If we take a look at these results, what you will actually see in here is we're going off and we're creating our pet, which is returning this particular pet it's just created with this ID. And when we get our pet, we're actually getting back the same value. So we can be pretty confident that we've gone off and created the pet, but now it's persisted, and whenever we call, we get the same values back. Thanks for watching this video. Visit testmodeler.io to start your free trial today.